It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Gone in seconds, the Baltimore bridge hit by a 95,000-ton cargo ship that was out of control.
Yo! What the What the Oh my gosh!
At first I thought it was a sonic boom from an airplane. I've never heard a sound quite like it. It lasted for 6 to 10 seconds, and then just indescribable.
It's understood the ship lost power moments before hitting the Francis Scott Key Bridge. We'll explain how it all happened. Also tonight, documents reveal how the Clapham chemical attacker, a convicted sex offender, was baptised and granted asylum in the UK. The King is to attend Easter service this Sunday and today hosted faith leaders at Buckingham Palace.
Knock the attitude off. We've made the decision and you're coming in.
Survivors of the Nova Music Festival attacked by Hamas tell Sky News their detention at Manchester Airport was anti-Semitic. Wales-Poland Euros qualifier goes into extra time at Cardiff City Stadium with a nervous wait for penalties. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. A number of vehicles and construction workers were on the bridge in Baltimore when a 900-foot cargo ship crashed into it in the early hours of the morning. The pictures of the bridge collapsing in seconds reverberated around the world. Well, tonight, 6 people are still unaccounted for, and residents who live nearby have described hearing a loud bang as the ship collided. The governor warned the people of Baltimore that the process will take time. Well, the ship was travelling out of Baltimore and issued a mayday call before smashing into the pylon. In a moment, we'll look at what went wrong and why the bridge collapsed so quickly. But first, our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports now from Baltimore.
It's been Baltimore's main bridge for nearly 50 years. In the space of 4 seconds, it was gone.
The entire Key Bridge.
This is the moment a first responder realises what has happened.
The entire Key Bridge has fallen into the harbour.
A cargo ship had slammed into one of the bridge's vital support pillars.
Yo! What the
From the banks of the Patapsco River, people watched in horror.
Oh my gosh!
Daybreak bringing a bracing sight of mangled metal and the realisation that several people on the bridge at the time of the collapse are still missing.
Hard to understand how it could happen.
Jim's house overlooks the bridge. He was woken by the noise of the impact.
The house shook a little bit, and at first I thought it was a sonic boom from an airplane. I've never heard a sound quite like it. It lasted for 6 to 10 seconds, and then just indescribable.
All those unaccounted for are maintenance workers from Mexico and Central America, Sky News understands. They were fixing potholes on the bridge. Jose works for the same company.
Yes, my friends were working there. It's very hard.
Have you been able to find out any news about them?
A supervisor called me in the morning. They had rescued one of my colleagues, but he was in a coma.
Did you ever imagine something so awful could happen?
No, I never imagined that. The path where the boat goes was supposed to be a safe zone.
The ship had departed Baltimore Harbour. It was half an hour into a 27-day journey to Sri Lanka when it ploughed into the bridge.
The crew aboard this vessel made a mayday call just minutes before impact, saying the boat had lost power and warning of a potential disaster. That gave officials time to stem the flow of traffic on the bridge and presumably avoiding an even worse catastrophe.
By being able to stop cars from coming over the bridge, these people are heroes. They saved lives last night.
Was the collapse of that bridge inevitable as that ship hit that part of the bridge?
No, we're still in the process of investigating exactly what happened. So we don't have any further details about whether or not it was inevitable.
But no structural issue with the bridge?
No, there was. In fact, the bridge was actually fully up to code, so we have no further information.
This is what the bridge looked like before today. 31,000 vehicles crossed it every day. President Biden said federal government would pay for the reconstruction.
As I told Governor Moore, I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible.
But for now, authorities are focused on what they say remains a search and rescue operation. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Baltimore.
Well, an investigation is now underway into what happened, which authorities say will include how the bridge collapsed so quickly. Our science editor, Thomas Moore, and Sky's data and forensics team have been taking a closer look.
No bridge is designed to withstand an impact with a ship as big as the Dali. Laden with containers, it would have weighed almost 100,000 tonnes. Officials said the crew had issued a mayday call and reported a loss of power. They dropped their anchor, but with so much momentum, they would have been helpless as they headed for Baltimore's key bridge.
If the propeller suddenly stops, the flow of water over the rudder is reduced. But on a ship of that type, it's very, very difficult to maneuver. And I'm sure that the command of the ship and the pilots did utmost to try and avoid that collision, even by going hard to port to avoid the pier. But obviously it's not been to no effect. It's been too little too late.
The Dali left the port of Baltimore at 12:45 at night, heading out to the key bridge that spans the Patapsco River, destined for Sri Lanka. It should have followed the navigational channel, passing between red and green buoys, but it veered off course to strike the bridge support. Take a closer look at the CCTV with a ship here on the left. 4 minutes before the crash, the vessel's lights go out with total loss of power and propulsion for around 60 seconds. There's a cloud of smoke, perhaps as the engines fire up, but then power was lost once again. At 1:28, travelling at just under 9 miles an hour, it smashed into one of the pillars. 4 seconds later, the bridge collapses, constructed as a single steel section supported by columns. Once one span falls, the rest quickly follow.
The rest of it is dragged down and the last span then falls down because there's just so much going on.
It's like a domino effect.
It's a domino effect all the way across.
But it's not the structure that failed, it's the lack of an effective barrier to stop the collision in the first place.
So in a modern bridge, what we do is we need to provide a means of stopping the ship from hitting the bridge at its column supports. So you've got those supports in the middle there. What we would do is build an island off the seabed, fairly gently sloping one, so that if the ship were to try and hit the bridge, then of course it runs up this underwater island, so it comes short of the columns. So therefore there's no chance of damage to the bridge.
When the Baltimore Bridge was built in the 1970s, ships were a third of the size and the protection needed far less. Why the Baltimore Bridge wasn't retrofitted with better protective barriers is unclear, and authorities will want to know whether there are others vulnerable to a similar disaster. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
Well, Martha Kellner is in Baltimore for us tonight. And Martha, incredible scenes overnight and today. President Biden saying they would move heaven and earth to reopen the port, but devastation right now for those families still waiting.
Yeah, certainly, Anna. And I think there's a sense of sheer disbelief around the city of Baltimore. People have been coming in their hundreds down to the riverbank to get this vantage point of the bridge, not able to quite fathom what they're seeing. This structure, which has stood for almost half a century, now almost completely gone. I was just speaking to one lady who says, I can't believe it, this can't be real. It's unreal. Many of them sad. I've seen people in tears too, but clearly the deepest sense of desperation and devastation lies with the families and friends of those 6 people still unaccounted for. We understand they were all working to repair potholes on that bridge. I've been speaking throughout the day to the family of a man named Miguel Luna. They say he was actually welding on the bridge at the time of the collapse. They say he and all of his crew are still missing. His family were picked up several hours ago now by a police car from his home. They were taken to a secret location, they told me, in downtown Baltimore, where they're surrounded by the families and friends of the other missing men. They're still waiting for news, hoping against hope for a miracle really now, because the period of survivability in waters like this, around 9 degrees Celsius, experts say is between 1 and 3 hours. Well, we're now 16 and a half hours on, still no news. It is at the moment designated a search and rescue operation, but surely not for much longer.
Martha, live was there in Baltimore. Thank you. Documents released today have revealed why a convicted sex offender was granted asylum in the UK. In January this year, Abdulazidi attacked a woman and 2 children with a chemical in South London. The 35-year-old from Afghanistan had twice been refused asylum by the Home Office after arriving in the UK on the back of a lorry in 2016. Sky's Communities correspondent Becky Johnson obtained the documents and has tonight's story.
At the time he was baptised, Abdulazidi was in the country illegally, a failed asylum seeker and convicted sex offender. But his claim to have converted to Christianity from Islam would lead to him being granted permission to remain in the UK. Other previously unseen evidence used to back his asylum appeal are photos of him handing out church leaflets. A judge accepted that becoming a Christian would put him at risk of persecution if he returned to Afghanistan, despite the Home Office previously deciding Ezidi's conversion was not genuine. It was the evidence of a retired reverend from Grange Road Baptist Church in Jarrow near Newcastle that the judge said was most compelling. Roy Merrin wrote a letter to the court confirming that Ezidi attended regular worship services. Reverend Merrin told Sky News he had no further comment in response to his letter being made public. But he told Ezidi's appeal hearing in Newcastle that he'd previously attended tribunals for 4 other asylum seekers, all of whom were successful in their claims. These documents reveal a process within the asylum system that we, the public, don't often get to see. Appeals are decided in courts by judges, not by the Home Office. And these documents reveal that in a hearing that lasted just under an hour and a half, a man with a very troubling past was granted leave to remain in Britain. But even as he decided in Ezidi's favour, the judge highlighted concerns about his honesty. That decision to grant asylum meant Ezidi was free to live in the UK when he carried out this horrific chemical attack on a woman and 2 children in Clapham earlier this year. He then went on the run before his body was found in the River Thames. We now know that despite welcoming him in, the church had drawn up a safeguarding contract because of his sex offending past to protect the rest of the congregation.
Having experience at the Newcastle Tribunal, you don't always get decisions that, you agree with. But what I have got is a very general respect for the immigration judges, from what I've read, that the Home Office themselves didn't bring up the sexual offence in the refusal. It would be a surprise if it wasn't brought up in the actual refusal decision.
The Home Office says all asylum claims are carefully considered and religious conversions do not guarantee a grant of asylum. Baptists Together insists it did not corporately support or sponsor Abdulazidi's application. But this case raises serious questions around the role of the church and the courts in deciding who gets to stay in Britain. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Buckingham Palace has announced that the King will attend this Sunday's Easter service before releasing pictures of His Majesty hosting faith leaders today. The Queen has been leading royal duties while the King is being treated for cancer, attending an event at Clarence House this evening. A warning: this report by Alice Porter contains flash photography.
It was business as usual for the Queen.
Your talents, your imagination, your originality.
A reception at Clarence House for Camilla's own literary charity, the Queen's Reading Room. But it's the story of her own family which is gripping so many people.
How are you feeling?
King Charles hasn't been doing public engagement since revealing last month that he has cancer. And just last week, the Princess of Wales shockingly revealed her cancer diagnosis, forcing her to step back from royal duties.
My work has always brought me a deep sense of joy, and I look forward to being back when I'm able. But for now, I must focus on making a full recovery.
The King has still been hosting smaller engagements, and today was seen meeting with faith leaders at Buckingham Palace. Then it was announced that the King will attend the Easter service at St George's Chapel in Windsor, an important tradition in the royal calendar. The Easter service here in Windsor will be the most significant public appearance by the King since he revealed his cancer diagnosis. With the Princess of Wales unable to work, it's clearly made Charles even more determined to resume his duties. It's understood Easter will be a smaller gathering than normal, but the Queen is certainly attending. Camilla has taken on numerous engagements while the King has been incapacitated. She'll be acting on his behalf at the customary Maundy service on Thursday. A woman who was once vilified by the public for her relationship with Charles, now steering the monarchy through one of the family's most challenging times. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Rishi Sunak was forced to do a mini reshuffle today after 2 Conservative ministers resigned from government. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, joins me now from Westminster. So 2 more MPs quitting tonight, among it seems many. Sam, why do they matter?
I think there's a couple of reasons, Anna. The first is that both James Heappey and Rob Halfon are loyalists. Look, I've known them both for a long time, privately, publicly. They back the Rishi Sunak project, and that matters, and people will wonder why they're going as a result of that. And the second reason, Anna, is that neither really genuinely have given credible, in-depth explanations as to why they are stepping down from Parliament, forcing them to leave their ministerial jobs immediately, which I think will raise eyebrows and prompt questions about whether that's simply because of the broader electoral weather and the way that is blowing. These are 2 characters, 2 figures in our politics that carry weight inside the Conservative Party. Take James Heappey. He's 43. He was first elected in 2015. I think there's no doubt that people know inside the Conservative Party and Parliament more generally that his passion is defence, and he denies that he is going because of the lack of uplift in defence spending, something that Rishi Sunak basically reiterated today. But I think that there will be suspicions that he isn't hearing what he wants to hear, and so that might be contributing to his decision to step down. But then there's Rob Halfon. Now, he is a junior education minister, but that job title doesn't nearly belie the enormous impact this MP has had on the Conservative Party over the 14 years he's been in Parliament since 2010. He is an emblem of what he might call blue-collar conservatism, what other people might call working-class conservatism, speaking to a slice of the electorate that not many Conservative MPs do, bringing them along and championing their causes. Some chancellors call him one of the most expensive MPs in Parliament because he is behind the fuel duty freeze or reductions that have bedeviled chancellors, cost a lot, but kept the cost at the pumps down over so many different budgets. He is going as well. And I think basically tonight, Anna, some Tory MPs look at these 2 deciding they don't want to be part of Rishi Sunak's coalition, the other side of the general election, and asking, if them, why not me?
Sam, thank you. The Russian security service, the FSB, says it has not ruled out involvement by the UK, the United States and Ukraine in the attack on the concert hall last week, in which nearly 140 people were killed. Alexander Botnikov said Kyiv had helped prepare Islamist radicals at a location in the Middle East. Kyiv has already denied involvement, and international intelligence services outside Russia have indicated the Islamic extremist group ISIS-K were behind the attack. We do know the suspects were citizens of Tajikistan. Tajiks make up a big part of migrant workers in Central Asia. Sky's Diana Magne has been speaking to people in the Tajik community in Moscow.
Outside the Tajik consulate in Moscow, dismay and revulsion at what was done at Crocus City Hall by 4 citizens of Tajikistan.
I want to say that the rest of the Tajiks are not to blame for anything. And we also grieve with you, and it was very scary for us too.
If I were the state of the Russian Federation, I would kill them with an axe, firstly. Secondly, they're not our nation. I can honestly say this is not our nation. These are not people.
Migrant labourers from Central Asia are everywhere in Moscow and across the country, doing the jobs that Russians won't for very little money and no security. Street cleaning, construction, food delivery. living in crammed dormitories on the outskirts of town. Though at this one they won't take them, we're told. Not since the war, not even for the £2 a night they charge. This is the second dormitory that we've been to on the outskirts of Moscow. They say they do take Central Asian migrants, that a lot of Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Tajik migrants live here and work in warehouses or for Yandex Taxi. They say that there are quite a lot of security checks. The FSB was here just this morning. I think it's safe to assume that those kinds of checks will only get more rigorous and that it will become more difficult for Central Asian migrants to live, to work, to find accommodation even in Russia. Vladimir Putin has instructed officials to tighten the laws around migration and promised that justice would be served against the perpetrators of Friday's attack.
I hope that prosecutors within their powers, including when presenting state charges and during the trial, will do everything necessary to ensure that the criminals receive a fair punishment as required by Russian law.
The death penalty is banned for now, but there are calls for that to change. And in Russia, those often become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The same goes for broader accusations of blame, away from the Tajik suspects, somewhat predictably towards the West. The boss of the FSB asked if the US, UK and Ukraine were to blame, saying he thought that was the case based on the facts he had. The rescue operation at the site is over. The clean-up and the spin around who's to blame, still with a long way to run. Diana Magne, Sky News, Moscow.
Border Patrol officials are being investigated after claims that they singled out 2 passengers arriving at Manchester Airport on the grounds they were Israeli. The 2 men are survivors of the October the 7th terror attack and were travelling to the UK to talk about their experiences. After being stopped at passport control, they were held and questioned for 2 hours. The brothers have been speaking to Sky's Greg Milam.
Daniel and Naria Sharabi came to England to share what they experienced on October the 7th, survivors of the Hamas attack on Israel. Instead, sharing the video of what they experienced with the UK Border Force.
The checks we need to conduct, okay? Nobody's saying that. Nobody has said that once. So knock the attitude off. We've made the decision and you're coming in. So just let us do the checks we need to do and keep quiet. Look at me. Okay, you clear with that? Good. We're the bosses, not you, all right?
Those officials at Manchester Airport, they say, also told them they had to make sure you're not going to do what you're doing in Gaza over here. They were detained for 2 hours.
It's very bad after you've been through so many things and terrible things, and you arrive to new country, England, you don't accept to things like this from the police officer in the border. It's not nice welcome.
We're facing with this anti-Semitism, and honestly, if I will hear it from some civilians, it will be okay because it's civilians. But when I hear it from cop that he official job and he's supposed to watch me and give me the feeling that I'm saved, and he do exactly the opposite. So I don't know what to think. Honestly, after what happened, I'm not feel saved here.
The brothers had been at the Nova Music Festival on October the 7th. They now support other survivors. The Jewish Representative Council of Greater Manchester, which invited them to the UK, says no Israeli traveller should face discrimination. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, posted on X, "We are investigating this. We do not tolerate anti-Semitism or any form of discrimination. This incident will be handled in line with our disciplinary procedures."
This is not how you're supposed to treat a human being. It's not matter if you are Jewish or Christian or Muslims. And this thing's supposed to stop. We need to fight with this anti-Semitism.
They plan to encourage other survivors to come to the UK to share their stories. They say now they're unlikely to, for fear of anyone else facing the same treatment. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted that Israel will not surrender, saying a vote by the UN Security Council for an immediate ceasefire has emboldened Hamas. In Gaza, there are still increasing concerns about the threat of famine. On Monday, the RAF airdropped more than 10 metric tons of British food aid into Gaza for the first time. Hamas say 12 Palestinians drowned today while attempting to reach an American aid drop on a beach near Beit Lahir. Despite the UN Security Council's demand for a ceasefire, the fighting is still going on, with the threat of a ground invasion of the southern city of Rafah, currently home to 1.5 million Palestinians, continuing. Food insecurity has also increased in the occupied West Bank as a result of the war. Thousands of Palestinians who had worked in Israel have lost their jobs since October the 7th, with aid distribution made all too difficult by the complex infrastructure of Israeli checkpoints across the West Bank. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, met aid workers in Ramallah and Hebron on the West Bank and sent this report.
There is an urgency to their work as the war in Gaza has become even more grim. These are Jewish human rights activists working in the West Bank alongside Palestinians to deliver food aid at a time when more and more families are facing difficulties.
The West Bank is in an economic catastrophe at the moment. When we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who were working in Israel, and on October the 7th, suddenly their jobs ended. Along with that, you've got a lot of army restrictions around freedom of movement and getting to workplaces.
Organiser Anton Goodman knows he's in a tiny minority, as public opinion after October the 7th is hardening, with many Israelis convinced more than ever that the peace camp is misguided.
So we can have reactions in my community, in my friend circle, saying, why would you be helping the enemy? Why are you not helping our people at this time?
But he hopes these types of actions will provide the building blocks eventually for greater cooperation and coexistence. The boxes of flour, rice, oil and lentils are soon loaded onto a truck, each one enough to feed a family for a week. The journey from Ramallah to Hebron isn't far, but it is a circuitous route, avoiding and getting stopped at checkpoints on the way. We're just reaching our destination. It should be a relatively short journey, but we've had to navigate checkpoints which have slowed us down. Now, when we get into Hebron, the aid will be unloaded by Palestinian volunteers who are working with the Jewish groups, and then it will be distributed to families who are most in need. Finally, after more diversions, the truck arrives. Food insecurity in the West Bank has increased as a result of the war in Gaza.
I didn't experience something like that in my life. I'm 44 now. It's the first time I see people starving inside Hebron city and other parts of West Bank and for sure in Gaza.
The boxes will be distributed across the city, this time by foot, 2 or 3 stacked at a time. They're taken across town. At the last checkpoint, there's another wait before the aid can pass. Even a simple operation to deliver small boxes of food is fraught with difficulties in the face of Israel's unending military occupation. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
To Cardiff now, and the Euros playoff between Wales and Poland ended goalless after extra time. So Wales needing to win a penalty shootout to keep their dreams alive of reaching the finals in Germany this summer. Let's find out what's happening. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris is in Cardiff. Tense times, Rob. What's happening?
We are deep into the penalty shootout at the moment. We're trying to hear the noise behind me in the Cardiff City Stadium as the goals are flying in between Poland and Wales. The game ended 0-0. It was a game of very few chances, and the best of them really coming from Kiefer Moore right at the start of the second half, but it was blocked, that chance, by the Polish goalkeeper Wojciech Szczesny. But it is actually Szczesny now who's just saved a penalty from Dan James as well in the shootout. So things are very, very tense. Poland have won 5-4 on penalties, ending Wales's hopes of qualifying for the European Championship. Heartache for Rob Page's team. They had made it to the last 2 Euros, even reached the semi-finals back in 2016. They're at the last World Cup in 2022, but there will be no trip for Wales to the European Championship in Germany this summer. We'll have 2 other home nations, Scotland and England, there instead. And tonight, Ukraine, amidst all the war, qualifying for the Euros themselves with their own victory tonight over Iceland. But here in Cardiff, after the game ended 0-0 through 120 minutes, a victory for Poland, 5-4 on penalties against Wales.
Rob, so close. Huge commiserations, obviously, for everyone there in Cardiff and across Wales tonight. Thank you very much indeed for updating us there. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we are joined by the journalist and author Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant and now Conservative candidate in the upcoming general election, Alex Dean. And among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Metro, its headline, Heartbreak Bridge, referring, of course, to this morning's awful events in Baltimore. Back with that and more after this break. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. A search and rescue operation is continuing after a collision with a container ship caused the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore to collapse. Also tonight, court documents have been released revealing why Clapham chemical attacker Abdul Azidi was granted asylum in the UK despite being a convicted sex offender. And the double resignation of ministers James Heappey and Robert Halfon has forced Rishi Sunak into a mini reshuffle ahead of the Easter recess. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant and Conservative candidate in the upcoming general election, Alex Dean. Welcome to both of you. With us from now until just before midnight, I know. So to the front pages, let us start with the Metro, referring to this morning's awful events in Baltimore. The Metro has the headline, Heartbreak Bridge. The Daily Mail reporting on how the Clapham chemical attacker was allowed to stay in the UK despite new files revealing that he lied about his past. The Telegraph includes the Home Office warning that churches risk undermining the asylum system following the news that the chemical attacker also failed a Christianity test. The Times reports that satisfaction with the NHS has fallen to a historic low, with only a quarter of the public believing that the health service is working. The Guardian reveals that the Confederation of British Industry has used gagging clauses to prevent staff discussing their experiences of sexual misconduct and bullying at the organisation. And the Eye reports that the state pension age may rise to 68 in order to fund a Conservative pledge. The Mirror reports on 2 British men fighting for Putin's army in Ukraine. And the Financial Times reporting that Donald Trump's Truth Social quickly gained 50% on its initial value following its debut on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us, listen to our guests. So let's head to Jenny Kleeman and Alex Dean. And some really dramatic pictures, Jenny, of this Baltimore bridge collapse on the front pages.
Really extraordinary. And I was just saying to Alex during the break there that, you know, because I know how big a shipping container is, you get a sense of the scale of all of this, of what an enormous vessel crashed into an enormous bridge, and what could have been an untold number of lives lost had this Mayday signal not gone out from those on the ship in advance. They stopped.
And these are the moments, aren't they? The lights going out, looks like power had gone, you know, flashing on again, smoke billowing from the back of it, and then, you know, pinging that bridge, and very quickly the bridge collapsed.
It is just extraordinary. No matter how many times I see these pictures, I can't. You know, it's extraordinary every single time. The bridge just collapses within seconds. But yes, there were no cars on this bridge because of the Mayday signal that went out, which is, you know, incredibly fortunate. Although there are 6 people who are missing, who are you know, trying to repair potholes on the bridge, and we are going to feel the aftermath of this because this port was. You know, it is supposed to be the main port on the eastern seaboard where cars are imported. It's the sort of Suez Canal for the export of cars, you know, various other things that could be affected. Coal could be, sugar could be, LNG could be. This is a major, major port. The entire port is shut for the moment. And then there's also, you know, traffic across the bridge. It's a huge disaster. But in terms of lives lost, it could have been so much worse if it weren't for the quick thinking of the crew.
Yes, 30,000 vehicles a day. Joe Biden reiterated the bridge is critical for what they call the Northeast Corridor. 850,000 vehicles going through that port each year in terms of import and export, coal and other goods as well. 15,000 jobs relying on this port. And the promise from Joe Biden to move heaven and earth, to clear it, first of all, and then reopen it. But still, this is a rescue operation, despite the temperatures in that water.
Yeah, and you've got to think, given the environmental conditions, very sadly, it may be fruitless to hope for people surviving, I'm afraid. The President knows this part of the world quite well. He was, of course, Senator for Delaware for decades. He would have been up and down the Delmarva Peninsula in this part of Maryland many, many times. I know Baltimore quite well, but most visitors don't go to this part of the year, Patapsco and this part of the of town. It's more industrial, but it is an enormous scene of sadness for me and for the people of Maryland. I do just make the point about the infrastructure. Questions, I mean, today is for trying to clear up, and if lives can be saved, fantastic, and for rejoicing that more lives weren't lost. Questions will be asked about whether there was adequate safety and security in place. We build infrastructure for a long time, but we do try and make it safe over time too. And many bridges have cushioning apparatus built around them.
Often metal, so they deflect.
So it can help glance off a blow, and that seems not to have been in place. Not to carp about things, I'm certainly not a bridge expert, but I am no doubt questions will be asked about this.
Yes, one person I heard suggesting that they were too small and in the wrong place. So whether retrospective building on this decades-old bridge should have been in place, and whether other people need to look at other bridges in light of these enormous vessels going through these spans.
When they built the Francis Scott Key Bridge, people were not moving cargo at this kind of volume and scale. That bridge was not designed to take an impact from that boat.
Yeah. Yeah, and so much investigation underway. Obviously what happened on the vessel, how it lost power, as it seems. The Mayday, which clearly, as you said, allowed people to run into the road and stop traffic. As you can see vehicles going across, can't you, in the initial pictures. And also, as Alex was talking about, the protections at the base of the bridge and why a bridge like that goes down so quickly and so completely.
It goes down so quickly.
Yeah,
it's sort of within 3 seconds, the entire thing kind of crumbles. The authorities there are very quick to rule out terrorism, rule out anything of that sort. Of course, we're living in an age where people are going to speculate no matter what is said.
Immediate conspiracy
theories. Yes, for them, there's going to be extensive investigation about all of this, and hopefully this will be something that, as you say, people can learn from, and other bridges can be reinforced, because the potential for loss of life on this is so enormous. Yeah. Really so enormous. So, we really hope that lessons can be learned.
Yeah, and this idea of getting it all moving quickly, you've got to get all this out of the way first.
Yes, and it's
an enormous construction project.
It's going to be a hell of a bit of work. If people who know that part of the world, there's a famous Fort Carroll just in front of the bridge, which is built for the American Civil War, on a little island, has a lighthouse on it. That's a kind of thing that people might know about if they're in and around the Delmarva environment. But this is a big body of water, right? Which, makes it so incredibly unlucky that it hit the standing rather than going through the enormous gap under the bridge. But my point is, this is a huge amount of metal in the water, and you're not going to know it's going to be safe for shipping going through it until you've recovered the majority of it from the water.
Yeah,
that's absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah,
Look at the
amazing
size
photograph there. The damaged bow of the container ship, Dali, in the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore after the vessel struck the crossing and destroyed it yesterday. 6 people reported missing, and certainly our correspondent who's in Baltimore suggesting that people have been taken away by emergency services who are apparently those of the missing, and they're being held together now, while they wait. Truly horrific, really, for those people who are, as we heard, mending potholes on a bridge overnight. Really difficult, but some really, extraordinary pictures certainly in the newspapers. Should we move on to the Yazidi documents?
Yes.
A number of news organisations, including our own, had been asking for information about this. Yeah. It has finally been forthcoming. The Daily Telegraph is one of those newspapers who are carrying this, sort of taking it on effectively. So Abdul Yazidi, first of all, he was the Clapham chemical attack suspect who then went missing. The question is, did he convert to Christianity, and why was he allowed to be granted asylum?
And his application for asylum was supported by a Baptist minister, who, it emerges in the course of these discussions and disclosure, for which I give credit to your channel and in these titles, it emerges this person had given supportive evidence in 5 previous asylum applications, which had also been successful. I'd make an unpopular point. It is the job of faith organisations to give people the benefit of the doubt, perhaps even to be naive and to be willing to see someone's better side. But it's the job of the authorities concerned to be sceptical and say, pull the other one, it's got bells on. Especially after, in the way that the church was dealing with this man, they said, well, since he came to the UK, he's been convicted of sexual assault. We're aware he's got this order against him, so we'll just have to let him not come to the church unless he's supervised and so forth, and still support his asylum application.
Yes, I have to say I completely agree with you here. There's a lot of focus in this coverage about, the headline in the Telegraph here is churches undermining asylum system. This was a judgment made by an immigration judge who has to make a judgment call on the basis of all of the evidence. This is somebody who had been found guilty repeatedly of committing sexual offences. It should not be the case, and I know this is to do with the law and not the judgment of the judge, but it should not be the case that you can be granted asylum in this country if you have been found guilty of sexual offences. That cannot be right.
Especially once here.
Yes, one's here, exactly. And this is not just one. He was indecent exposure and another sexual offence. Also, you know, the details here in this Telegraph piece, the evidence presented to the court showed that he had lied persistently about his background. He had claimed to be Shia when he was Sunni. He had claimed in some cases that his brother was killed by a bomb in Afghanistan, and then in other places he'd said other things. You know, when you actually look at the evidence, which the judge would have done, this does not seem like a strong case for asylum. So it's claiming that this is the church's fault or this particular reverend's fault for supporting several claims. There are many, many pieces here in this puzzle which the full picture would say this man should not have been granted asylum.
Just to dwell for a moment on that point about being convicted of an offence in the United Kingdom. It will often form a part of an applicant's case that, of course, I've got these false convictions against me back home. That's because the system is prejudiced against me back home. That's why you can't trust that. So it's not to be flippant about sexual assault convictions in the other country. It's say once you're here and you're applying from a system we believe to be fair, and that same system has convicted you, it should count heavily against you to the point of excluding you.
And I would say, especially in the case of sexual offences, it's just beyond belief that the system would allow this to slip through the net, and this is
the consequence.
This is the consequence.
Well, I mean, fiasco is the word the Daily Mail uses here. Clapham chemical attacker, asylum fiasco. The judge, in his summary, raising questions about the honesty of him, and also some of the evidence was him handing out church leaflets. You know, photographs of him handing out, you know, church leaflets. So
well, that's nice.
What counts as evidence, really? I suppose.
And I've no doubt that well-meaning people said, one, get involved in the church, and two, go and do this. It'll help your asylum application. It doesn't mean that the system has to believe you, and it doesn't mean that they have to think that's compelling evidence.
Yes, and I would say, you know, this is not necessarily the fault of the people involved in the church, because they're not the ones who make the decision.
Exactly.
Although, you know, it's about the immigration judge making that decision.
Now let's go to The Guardian. They came in an exclusive, and this is the use of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, used, they suggest, at the CBI, which is, you know, prevalent in many spheres, to be fair, the use of NDAs.
Yes.
But tell us more.
Although the CBI has had a pretty bad time over the past year, had to change its chief executive as a result of allegations being made about sexual impropriety, sexual misconduct. And The Guardian's report here says that in the last year, so this is since these allegations come to light, these NDAs have been signed in the past year, and substantial financial settlements have been received from the CBI from people making these claims. And this is, of course, a disaster for the CBI that already has a very tarnished image as a consequence of these allegations from last year. And, you know, we know that, for example, Zelda Perkins, who was Harvey Weinstein's PA, has been campaigning against these NDAs, particularly when they are used to stop people speaking out about sexual misconduct, because what they do is they allow perpetrators to continue, because, you know, you sign something, you get a payoff, the person stays in their post, they can potentially offend again. You know, you're not meant to use, morally, you're not meant to use NDAs in this way.
Well, I need to get to break, but just quickly, MPs have actually looked at this, haven't they?
Yes.
As part of their sexism in the city investigations, and recommended against the use of them.
But of all the organisations that shouldn't be using them, the CBI is top of the list.
It's simply incompatible with claiming that you're trying to change your culture to use gagging clauses while you're doing it.
OK. Lots more still to come. You thought it was broke? Think again. Donald Trump's social media app does well on its stock market debut, and we mean well. Back with that in just a moment.
It's extremely worrying. I mean, we know that they've already established themselves now in northern France, which means they can actually fly across the channel quite easily. So keeping them out of the country is going to be very, very difficult. But it is also a fact that in the latter part of last year, August, September and October, over 14 nests were destroyed, and not all of them were in Kent. Now, at that stage, new queens will have already hatched, gone off to find somewhere to overwinter. So it is virtually certain now that the Asian hornets are breeding and living in the UK, and that's a huge concern. As you said, an adult Asian hornet can eat roughly 50 honeybees. That also transcribes to an entire nest of bumblebees for one hornet. So imagine what a nest of them could be doing to our population of bees. They could have quite a catastrophic impact on bees because, again, because they've come in from abroad, there are not a lot of things that go and predate them in this country. So it's very, very worrying. And of course, they're establishing in the moment in southern England, and that is where some of our rarest bumblebees exist, things like the shrill carder-bee and the brown-banded carder-bee. So it'd be quite easy to see them having a devastating impact on populations like that. And of course, the knock-on effect will also be a devastating impact on pollination in this country. If we lost all our pollinators, it would put about £2 billion a year on our food bill for selected foods like fruit and peas, etc., because we have to pay people the minimum wage to go out and hand pollinate. So the knock-on effect for consumers in this country alone would be absolutely catastrophic if they get established and wreak havoc. You must report them immediately, even if you're not 100% sure, because it could be a European hornet, which are actually quite welcome visitors to our gardens and our landscape. If you see something, report it. The people will come out there, they will check it out. If it's a European hornet, nothing to worry about. If it's an Asian hornet, they will try and track it down. And sometimes they will actually put a little tracking device on board one if they can capture it, and then they can track it back to its nest. And that's the only way really to find where these nests are and to be able to destroy the nest. So if you see something, even if you're in doubt, report it. If you can get a picture, even better.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview, joined once again by Jenny Kleeman and Alex Dean. Welcome back to both of you. Donald Trump. Now, if this had happened the day before, things might have been different in his appeal court hearing about the $464 million that he was supposed to pay to the court, which was reduced heavily because his Truth Social media site has been massively valued.
It's the holding group around it. So Trump Media and Technology Group, for which that is the most famous part, has now been listed, and its shares jumped enormously on listing and has a technical valuation now of $14 billion US dollars. The reason I say technical is that were somebody with a stake as large as the former president's to sell their stake, then it would drop back down again. So it's actually sort of catch-22. If you were told to liquidate your assets in it, which currently on the clauses for sale he couldn't, there's a 6-month break, then the price would plummet again and you'd have to work out what
but his value
was left.
Of this theoretical is now
$5 billion US dollars.
On paper.
$5 billion.
On paper. Yeah. And, you know, what's interesting about this is, you know, Truth Social doesn't make a profit. There aren't many people who are on it. In many ways, this valuation is more about the enthusiasm of Trump supporters and their willingness to put their money where their mouth is in terms of supporting him than anything else. I mean, this is an endorsement of them investing in him. And whether or not in 6 months' time it will have this valuation is another matter. But he needs cash, and not just because of this bond in the New York civil case. He's also going to be fighting a presidential election, and it's said to be it's going to be the most expensive in terms of the advertising because it's so
Alex,
close.
It's really interesting. It's really circular, though. When somebody has this much money invested in a business through its listing, it could actually turn out a good product. Like, there's so much money you can use now. You might get even though it may not be the best media product in the world right now, you might, by dint of this investment, create something worth value.
OK. Quick rattle through, if you don't mind. I'm going to do the eye. Of great interest because we've heard from the WASPy women, those born in the 1950s, who say they weren't told the pension age was going up. The prospect that it's going to 68. Quick scan of when, which is the critical thing everyone wants to know. People aged 47 to 48 expecting to retire in 2044 could face a longer wait. But I know you want to get to the next story. Apologies,
Yes.
we'll do that in more detail later. In the Metro, about feedback.
Well, yes, a customer of British Gas was woken up by an automated call from British Gas at 3:15 a.m. wanting feedback on her experience dealing with British Gas. And a bugbear of mine is being asked for feedback on everything, every cab ride, your parking space. I get emails saying, you parked here, how was your parking experience? Every delivery, everything that you ever get. And it's because, you know, people want to, I don't know, get traffic, get ratings. But we're living in a world where you can't blink without being rated for blinking.
I'm with you, I'm with you. We're all with you.
She's right, but to rub salt into the wound, in this individual example, her complaint hadn't been resolved. So the robocall was actually particularly unhelpful.
There we go. Plenty more to talk about. We'll see you later. Thank you both very much indeed. Jenny and Alex, thank you. Here's the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So the next few days will be unsettled. It'll feel quite cold, looking milder for Easter. The north and west will start wet on Wednesday, snow on the Scottish hills. Most other places will be dry. Scotland will see further rain and hill snow through the morning. Other parts of northern and eastern Britain do look mainly fine.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, on Sky News at 11, we will have the very latest from Baltimore after that bridge collapse. Here's the live pictures from there. More of that and, of course, more of the press preview coming up on Sky News.